So we've got our studs coming through the drum. The problem is, I reached down there and picked that up, is that those studs are swedged in there, which means that they're put in there kind of smushed over. So we have the hub inside. So what we're going to do, I tried putting a nut on there and just pounding the studs out. That's not going to work. So what we got to do is get right around the stud here and get rid of this swedging that basically gets sort of peened over after everything's put together. And hopefully that will allow the drum to come off, and then more than likely we're going to have to knock these studs out and replace them with different studs. So more than 5 minutes work. Read somewhere where you can get a hole saw, 5/8, ½ inch, whatever it is, 5/8 probably, and go down over this stud and just work away and use the hole saw essentially to machine away the swedging. We'll have to look into that. Other than that, the only way to sort of do it is to grind around every stud, and that's going to be almost impossible. So we're going to be at least another day just on one wheel. So day 2 or whatever it is, we're continuing on with our brake upgrade, and we managed to get the hub off of the old brake drum, and we tried a couple of things. We got a 5/8 inch hole saw that we thought would go down over that ½ inch stud and carve away the swedging material, and that didn't work out too good because it was just a little bit bigger than ½ inch, a little bit smaller, I'm sorry, in here than ½ inch. So then we thought, okay, how about if we just cut the stud off, just leave the very bottom so we have a guide, and we'll try that. Well, that didn't work either because this tool didn't cut worth a hoot. So we do what we always do. We got a BFH and knocked it apart, knocked this first one down through here, and once we got that one loose, the rest of them followed suit. You can see on the back side here there's some splines there that hold that into place. A couple of these other ones are loose now, and I was hoping that we'd be able to use these existing studs, but they have a shoulder on them here, and that shoulder is too big to fit in the bolt hole of the drum. If we take the drum and put it on downside up, we can see that there's a gap here, and that's because the shoulder of that stud is hitting on the brake drum. So we're going to have to knock all the studs out. Our spiffy new drum there. We're going to have to knock all these studs out, and you can use a BFH. You're going to have to put something underneath here to support that, and you got that little bit of webbing here, so you'd have to have something on either side here to support that and knock that stud out, or you know, put it in a press the studs out, and then we're going to have to figure out a replacement stud to go in there. It'd be nice, you know, they kind of know this stuff, and it'd be nice if you got instructions that said, okay, do this, do that, and get this stud and do that, but nah, that's too easy. So at any rate, what we're going to do is knock the rest of these studs out, and we'll measure our hole there and figure out what kind of stud we got to go get to put it all back together. Well. Oh, I always do that. Well. After a fair amount of persuasion, we managed to get all of the studs out, and we had to use the press. And one thing you're going to have to do if you use the press is make sure that this area here is well supported around each stud when you press the stud out, so you don't bend this hub, the flange on the hub. But we can see now that we're down flush with the drum. Of course, that goes the other way around. Clean the rust off of that face. We can take our drum and set it down over that. And we can see inside that we're flush, we're centered. I don't know if you can see that or not. We're centered on our hub, and we can see in here that we're flush. And what we're going to have to do now is find the right stud to put in there. To measure those holes. It may be that depending on what we find, that we have to ream those holes a little bit for whatever stud we get, and then normally what you can do when you get a stud like that is you can go ahead and get it in there and use a lug nut and the impact gun to pull it through. You could press them back in. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, but for right now we need to measure this hole and figure out what kind of studs we want to put in there. Well, we got our junior size calipers here, and see what we get here. 627, that puppy is. That's 643, depending on where the splines were. 620. I would say that generally speaking, those are some 5/8 holes. Let's see if our 5/8, look at that, our 5/8 hole saw fits right in there. I would say that those guys are 5/8, and let's just measure the holes in the drum for giggles. 607, that one measures. 606, 607. The stud, of course, is just 1/2 inch. So we'll have to do some research and see what kind of stud we're going to put on there, and we'll go do that. Research. Let's see, that's like beer and some chips and look in the computer. thought it might be time to do some splaining. And we've got, this is the left side drum and hub. And over here we have the right side drum and hub that we took off the other day. And so normally that is inside the drum. And we talked a little bit about the studs being swedged in. And, you know, people may not, some people anyway, may not understand what that means exactly. So what happens is that they put the hub inside the drum and the studs come up through, and essentially they smash over the little edge of the stud here, essentially clamping it in place. And we've taken one of those out of the other one, and you can kind of see here you got a little bit of serration here, not much, but if you kind of look there you can see how you have it straight here and then how it sort of mushrooms out or flares out, and that's the swedging. They come down and hammer that, whatever they do to sort of mash that over, and that clamps the whole thing together. The hub and the drum and the stud clamps it all together. So in order really to get this apart properly, you've got to cut away that portion of the stud right here that's mushroomed out or swedged over. Now in this particular drum, somebody has already done that right here. You can see that there's a big hole there, and so probably what they had to do is replace a stud. Maybe the original one broke or whatever, but the other four are still swedged in. So there's a tool that's available, and it's anywhere from $100 to $150. It's essentially a cutter that will go down over this stud and cut away that bit of material there, and that will free the drum up. So you do it at all five of them, and the drum can come off the hub. It's really just a snug fit here in the center on the hub. That's what really centers the whole thing. But in order to take this apart properly, that's what you need to do. You need to cut away that bit of swedging or that material that's mushroomed over, get the drum off, and then push the studs out of the hub. And on this one over here, we did really what to say not to do, and that's knocked the studs back far enough with a BFH to free the drum up. And generally you'll find if you do that, that destroys the drum. Now in this particular case, we weren't going to use these drums anyway. Is it a shame to destroy the drum? Yes, but the demand for these is a lot less than the number of them that are around. Let's just put it that way. So you can maybe see that that drum, the face there, is distorted where we've knocked the studs back through, and so that guy is toast. So then we end up with the studs in this flange, and you really can't push the studs out of there again if you have this mushroom effect on there, because you run the risk of bending or breaking this hub, and it takes a tremendous amount of effort. We push these back through there, but you can see that they don't want to go, it doesn't want to go back in. Now it will there. The net result of that is that we've got to put new studs in there, and we have spent quite a bit of time and effort trying to find a stud that will go in there and replace this. And we started out with, I don't know, there was a recommended stud, 234, and that's not even that's not even close. That ain't even going to think about working, because these new studs have these teeth on there, splines, knurls, whatever you want to call them, and the object there is that when that goes up through there, it digs into the material and holds that in place, keeps it from turning. But we're way too small for that. So we finally came across this particular stud, and it's very similar to the original. Maintain the original half 20 thread. You can see here that this one has a flat ground on it, and that's so that it'll fit from the other side. So this replacement would have to have a flat ground on one side of it. But even the replacement is marginal here. You can see it just slips in there. Now, what you read is that if you take this apart, according to Hoyle, whoever he is, you then need to ream these holes out to 600 thousandths, and then you can use this particular stud that's, I think the knurled portion measures like 0.618, and that'll give you about a 15 thou interference in the hole. These holes in here are way bigger than 0.600. This particular stud is the largest stud, let's say not the largest stud, but the stud with the largest knurl or spline on it that we could find. If you go any bigger than this is 0.650, and if you go any bigger than that, you're going to end up with a 5/8 stud, and we don't want that. So, you know, that's really probably not going to work in there, but that's the best that we can do. And the net result of that is that we'll probably have to weld these studs in, which I would rather not have to do, but such is life. You can see here that there's a bit of reinforcement here, kind of a web, and that's why that stud has a flat on it. That also keeps it from turning. So, you know, you could put that in there. So what we're going to have to do is grind a flat on this the same way, because you can see that'll hit that. And, you know, I doubt whether that will lock in there. It might, we'll have to see. It's not going to lock in that one, is it? Just falls right in there. And so what we'll do is we'll get 5 of these. This particular stud is the number 610-122, and we'll grind the flats on there, and we'll use a washer and a lug nut to try to pull them through with the impact gun. But the other sort of fly in the ointment, and there's always another fly in the ointment. Every solution creates a problem. We want to remember that. Is we have our replacement drum here, and the shank here beyond the spline is bigger than, it's not that one. I was going to say, here, the shank here on this is bigger than the hole in the drum. So when we put these studs in here, let's see if I can get one to come up through there somewhere, like that. The drum has to fit over that. So the hole in the drum is too small, or the shank here is too big, one of the two. So now we have two options to fix that. We can put larger holes in the drum, or we can try to put this stud in the lathe and turn this shank down so that it fits that hole. But that's the process. That's a bit of splaining. I don't know if that's splaned anything or not. We're going to see on this one over here, since we're going to ditch the old studs. We know you can't reuse the old studs. Even if you grind that off of there, you really don't want to use the old studs because they don't have a heavy enough serration to keep them in place. Excuse me. So we had our 5/8 hole saw, and the problem with that is it got, the ID of that hole saw was just, you know, a few thousandths too small to really slide over that stud. So I think what we're going to try to do is take our drum sander and go around these studs and grind the threads down a little bit so that our hole saw will slide over that. And we were trying to use it with a hand drill. We'll probably put the hole saw in a drill press and see if we can cut away. The whole object is to cut away that shoulder there, like you see here. This one's cut away, and then free that drum up and get it off of there. And when we do that, we may find that when we press these studs out, that the holes in the flange on the inside are a little bit smaller, and we can use those other studs. We'll have to just see that. One thing that I could see as an aside is that it looked to me like this left front brake was doing all the work. That's probably why the car pulled to the left. Because I think the right front wheel cylinder was leaking, or that would probably be the indication, since the drum was kind of sloppy inside and the shoes were pretty crappy looking. So, you know, this is just a project that needed done, and we're getting there, but it's taken more than 5 minutes. That's my splaining for today. Probably somebody out there has a different idea. That's okay. Just put it in the comments, and it'll be good for everybody. But this is what you get into when you're trying to modernize old stuff. Alright, here's another little thing that we've discovered. These holes where the other studs come out leave a little bit of a ridge there, a little bit of a lip sticking up. So before you put your new studs in, you're going to have to get in there and make sure that that is flush. Sand it down, file it down, something. Alright, this is the other side, driver's side. We've got all the old studs out. What we did, hard to see now, the way we have this put together, but we got the drum off, and then we got in there with our cutoff wheel and essentially cut the studs off flush, cut away the mushroom part, and then just poked them out. So these holes in this flange ended up being quite a bit smaller than the ones on the passenger side, and we have these studs here I don't know, we got a whole sack of them. I don't know what number they are. Let's see. 610, 155. We had to take about 10 thou off of this shoulder here to fit through the drum, but we've got a lot more thread here than we had on those other studs, so I would prefer to use these. And what we've done here now, and they, for the most part, we knocked them in with a hammer. I have one, and it's the one that was replaced obviously before. That was a sloppy fit and just fell back out. They're not as tight as I would like them, so what we've done is got them all in there, and then found some washers here. There's a little bit of shoulder sticks up through there, so we had to get a larger area washer to go over the shoulder, or some spacers, put the lug nuts on backwards and tighten them down and pull those studs all up square to the flange. And then what we're going to do is go and visit our welder person, since I'm only qualified to melt things together. I'm not qualified to weld things together, and in this particular case it's not going to be easy to weld this stud to this flange, because I believe you got two different metals there. Obviously the stud is going to take the heat before the flange. This is where somebody tried to weld the other one in, and all they did was put a lot of weld on the stud and not much into the flange, and it didn't take much to knock that loose. Now, to be very honest, you know, what you got to do here obviously is keep the stud from turning when you tighten the wheel up. So at least in 4 out of the 5, there's a little bit of spline or knurl or whatever you want to call it engaged, and the weld should help it. And I think in this particular case, whoever welded it just welded it in one spot instead of welding on both sides. So we really want to have weld, you know, 1, 2, maybe even 3 spots on there. You don't really want to weld it all the way around, and hopefully that will hold that in place. Already stuck it on the spindle to make sure that the heads in these studs are a little bit thicker than the others, so already stuck that on there to make sure that it doesn't hit anything. And hopefully we get this off to our welder person and get this side done. I've got to pull the other side back off the car, and I believe that these studs, the knurl on these studs was around 6.3, yeah, not 0.63, 630 thou. I believe that they're going to be too small for the holes in that other hub, but I do have 2 different studs in that other hub. One is longer than the other, and I would prefer to have all of the 2 all longer ones rather than shorter ones. I'm a little concerned that by the time you put the drum on there and get the wheel on there, that you're not going to have enough stud. You really want your stud to come all the way through the lug nut. So that's what we'll work on next.